Hello and welcome into this edition of the Golf Show podcast with Rex and Lav. With the U.S. and the European teams have made their final preparations for the Ryder Cup, and they did so, Rex, in very familiar fashion. Scottie Scheffler came from behind to win for the sixth time this season on the PGA Tour at the Procore Championship, defeating his U.S. Ryder Cup teammate Ben Griffin by a single shot in Napa. Across the pond on the European side, it was newly named assistant captain Alex Noren, who wins for the second time in three starts, this time at the BMW PGA Championship, the flagship event on the European Tour. Alex Noren, by the way, all the way up to 18th in the world, yet he's going to don an earpiece, not a team uniform, and his clubs at Bethpage Black. Very interesting story there. Which story, though, Rex, stood out to you more? What happened for the U.S. At the Procore or for the European team across the pond?
I'm going to focus on the U.S. team. I was in Napa earlier in the week, had a chance to talk with all of the team members and all of the captains and the vice captains, get an idea of exactly what they were trying to do out in wine country. But before I do that, and you're sounding a little under the weather, we should point out that you were fresh off a flight from Cincinnati. Is that correct? Where you attended the Jaguars game?
Yes, I actually think I sound and feel better than anticipated after the
you don't
48
sound
hours.
great.
A little bit nasally. But
Sure.
I'm also operating on like 2.5 hours sleep. I had a very early flight to make sure I could get back in time for this record. I know the fans, Rex, have been just a hankering for some Procore Championship breakdown, and I'm determined and intent to give it to them.
Muscle throw. Yeah, you're playing hurt. I appreciate it. You sound like the Jags should feel right now. Actually, that's exactly what I expect the Jags.
Brian Thomas has like Lucas Glover 2013 putting yips. Like it's a very similar dynamic for what Brian Thomas has whenever he crosses over the middle.
And I know how much people love it when we don't talk about anything other than golf, but I am curious that the heartbreaking loss on Sunday, and my mind immediately went to you stopped returning texts from me and Eamon Lynch late Sunday afternoon. You didn't want to play our fun and games. You had no interest in what we were playing. However, I am curious that you've kind of had two very similar heartbreaking situations this year. You, of course, had Sunday with the Jags, who really should have won that game. And also, we talked a little bit about this. You were in New York City for the Sports Emmys. You were full of confidence. You were full of vigor. You thought for sure you were going to win. And I've never got a more depressed, dejected phone call from you in my entire life. You were walking home to your hotel with your lovely wife, and you were like, this sucks.
It does suck. It does suck to think you're going to win and to not win. My heart goes out to all the people at the Emmys, which are on Sunday night. My heart goes out to all the people with the Grammys, thinking you've had this great piece of work that you put all of your heart and soul into, and then you don't get the call. It's certainly heartbreaking. Thankfully, though, Rex, I am donning a University of Georgia polo on this Monday after. It could have been a very, very sad weekend after Georgia took Tennessee to the limit and ended up winning in overtime. So all in all, we're batting 500. That would certainly get you in the Hall of Fame.
And I'll go back to your original question. I will play your game on this front. Scottie Scheffler was wildly impressive. He was actually asked, and this was funny on Wednesday. It was a normal Scottie moment that we've ran into over the last couple of years, really. The opening question to his press conference on Wednesday was, Scottie, welcome to the Procore Championship. You've never won in California. And his response was predictably Scottie, and he went, thanks for that stat. Appreciate that. Like, way to start the press conference with something that's negative.
That was from the PGA Tour moderator, by the way.
It was. Poor Mark Williams opened with, you haven't won in California, thoughts please, which is a weird way to start a press conference, but Scottie certainly had a little fun with it. I will say, though, it got me thinking about the idea of if you want to poke holes in any part of Scottie Scheffler's game, and it's really hard. You and I did this exercise a few weeks ago about what, if anything, could slow him down. And like you start spitballing injuries, life get in the way, he loses interest. Like we couldn't really come up with a good one other than obviously injury is impossible to account for. However, before Royal Portrush, I know I was very, very stringent with the idea of the four majors, because we immediately turned to, okay, let's do Grand Slam talk when it comes to Scottie. I contended, and I still believe that the Open was going to be the most difficult, not because he didn't have a game for Links Golf. It's because Links Golf is so unpredictable, and he likes things to be predictable. He likes things to go according to plan. He likes to be prepared. He likes to check up all the boxes. He's a creature of habit. All of those things we have said about him, and yet he powered through and did what he did at Royal Portrush and thoroughly proved me wrong that he has the game for Links Golf, that he doesn't care about the variables. So when it came to California, my mind immediately went to, there was only one reason why he would have that kind of record in California, where he's won virtually everywhere else except for California, and that's because of Poa Greens. That's the only explanation. I remember having this.
He's barely played in California. He plays the Amex every so often.
Torrey Pines
I think he's only
LA.
played Torrey Pines a handful of times.
Well, LA, it's a signature event. So, I mean, those would be the three you would fixate on. Sure, there's fewer opportunities. That's probably fair. But I think the POA greens are really where you win. I remember having this conversation with Kevin Kisner a few years ago, another player who grew up playing Bermuda grass greens in the South, very familiar with it, very comfortable on them. He said if he could only play one West Coast event the rest of his career, Scottsdale, which has bent greens, he said he would be more than happy. He was more than happy to skip it because it is so unpredictable. And we saw it on Thursday afternoon. Last week, Scottie Scheffler was aggravated when we spoke with him after that opening round. And it's because of POA greens. He gave up more than a stroke to the field. He was ranked 115th in strokes gained putting after round one out of 144 players. And he played in the afternoon. That's when POA is at its worst. And look, there are plenty of players who have made a career on the West Coast. Phil Mickelson has largely done it. Certainly Marco Mura did it in his career. So it's not as though you can't. It just takes a certain mentality of wrapping your mind around. You can hit a perfect putt. You can do exactly what you need to do. And sometimes it's going to bounce out. But the fact that he powered through and was able to do what he did over the course of the weekend, he ended up picking up strokes on the green when it comes to the rest of the field. And the way he finished it off with, and I would say that was very quintessential Scottie. There's probably reasons for both captains, Keegan Bradley and Luke Donald, to be confident going into next week based on what happened in these tune-ups, both in London and out in Napa Valley. But if you're Keegan Bradley, you have to be flying high with the idea that, well, at least my horse is playing like my horse. Like he's going to go into this thing super hot and super ready.
And to your point about the POA greens, and I remember last year, like Scottie Scheffler wins 9 times. Those 9 wins overall included the Olympics, where the amazing final day rally. It also included the Hero World Challenge, an unofficial sort of silly season event where he only had to beat 19 other guys. But Scottie Scheffler won 9 times in 2024. And I guarantee you, if we ran it back, our season in review, we're like, what's Scottie Scheffler going to do for an encore, right? Like, what's the over-under? 4.5 wins? Like a 5-win season would be remarkable. Scottie Scheffler only, quote unquote, only has 6 wins so far in 2025. Now, he did miss about a month and a half because of that hand issue. Was a little bit slow to start. Didn't even win on the PGA Tour until the Nelson in early May. But you look from a strokes gain perspective, and to your point about the POA, Scottie Scheffler is a better golfer in 2025 than he was in 2024 when he won 9 times. And that's largely due to what he has done on the greens. He has turned what was a chief weakness in his game to now he's an above average putter on the PGA Tour. We know about his accuracy off the tee. He's a straighter driver of the golf ball than just about any other elite player. Look at his iron player, is peerless. We haven't seen anybody this good since Tiger Woods in his prime. You look at the hands and the softness. I don't even care what the scrambling stats are. Like if you could pick one player, Rex, to get up and down to save your life, who are you going to pick? It would be Scottie Scheffler, would it not? Like who else would you trust in that situation? And now you look at what he has done with Phil Kenyon, with whom, remember, he started just a couple of weeks prior to the 2023 Ryder Cup with Phil Kenyon. So we're just going on about 2 years' time, made the switch to the claw grip, and he has become now a phenomenal putter. It takes what maybe if he's a little bit off with his ball striking, he doesn't have a great round. He can still salvage good enough. He still shot 2 under in that opening round when he was so frustrated on the greens. And yeah, that left him a little bit more work to do. But with his ball striking, with his commitment, with his work ethic, with sort of his golf IQ and being able to diagnose some of his issues, like it was not that hard of work for him to shoot 64, 67 on the weekend and eventually hunt down what was the strongest field the Procore Championship has ever had. Sausage fingers up, which means it's your turn.
Well, no, you can keep going. By all means, take my turn. I cede my time to the gentleman from Georgia. However, I will also point out, and I think as we get further down the road, you and I clearly understand it right now in the moment, but 2 or 3 years from now, when we go back and recap 2025, we might dismiss that victory at the Procore Championship a little bit as a fall event, normally not the strongest fields. The difference between the field rating between that and the BMW PGA, as you pointed out, the European Tour's flagship event that had a very, very deep field, it was just 20 points, which is really nothing. It's a margin of, when it comes to the winning points that the winner gets, it's the difference of 2 or 3 points. It's not much at all. So it was a really good field. As a matter of fact, I think it was a better field rating than what he did when he won the Nelson. So it was
yeah.
not only a solid performance on a golf course that I did appreciate him talking about the idea that this was not an easy golf course for him. And it's kind of tough to wrap your mind around. Scottie Scheffler can make any golf course look easy, but it was clear he was uncomfortable on this. And as far as tune-ups go, I think I'll go back to where Keegan Bradley probably left Northern California thinking to himself, that's exactly what I wanted to accomplish. Not just for Scottie. You want your world number one to get the scorecard in his hand and knock the rust off, all the things we talked about. But all 10 of his players made the cut. You had 4 finishing inside the top 10. As you pointed out, Ben Griffin, who is kind of going to be an unknown. That's a variable that we don't know much about. He's one of the 4 rookies on the U.S. team going into Bethpage. So there's a lot of confidence on that side. And certainly Scottie Scheffler leads the way on that.
Yeah, I think overall, I was really impressed by the quality of play for all of the guys who are going to be either on the United States team or the European team. You look at the 21 players who teed up, obviously, Sepp Straka, Xander Schauffele. They had recent births in the family. Bryson DeChambeau obviously cannot play as a member of Lift Golf. He cannot play in the PGA Tour event. 20 of the 21 players made the cut. 7 of those went for top 10s. 12 of them went for top 20s. And look, that doesn't necessarily mean anything in like the grand scheme. Like all of a sudden, Ben Griffin's not going to go 5-0 in Bethpage just because he had a good week at Silverado. Silverado and Wentworth aren't, reasonable facsimiles for what the players are going to be facing at Bethpage. But that's not the point. The point is that all of these guys were maintaining a level of competitive sharpness. And when you're about to go into a cauldron unlike any other, when there's going to be more pressure, more anticipation, more nerves, different formats, different styles of play, different strategy, whether it's best ball or alternate shot, there has to be, I think, an elevated level of sharpness with the quality of your game. And to see almost all of these players, sans Bob McIntyre, who missed the cut at Wentworth, sort of rise to the challenge and check the boxes that they were looking to get out of their game, I thought was really, really impressive as it relates to Scottie in particular. This is a player who, Rex, has gone, I believe, 3-7-3 in his last 3 cup competitions dating to the 2022 President's Cup. And he made the point earlier the week, you were in the press conference, where he said it was so important for him this time around, just like the rest of the U.S. team, to stay in his routine. If this was a major championship, there is no world in which he'd be taking more than 5 weeks off before his last competitive start. And you now look at the stature of the Ryder Cup, the importance of the Ryder Cup. I know it's a glorified exhibition, but it means a lot to these guys. It means a lot to the stakeholders. It means a lot to the fans, treating the Ryder Cup as a major championship, getting ready, staying sharp, getting in sort of a warm-up / tune-up event was really important to Scottie Scheffler. The U.S. team cannot afford for him to have another week where he goes 0-2-2 or 0-3-1. He is a vital member of what is a pretty top-heavy U.S. team. And when you think sort of forecasting out Scottie Scheffler likely to play with Russell Henley, who I think you can make an argument is the second best player on that American team, if those two falter as a partnership, I think they could potentially be in dire straits because this American team is not as deep as it was. They can't absorb a sub 500 record for Scottie Scheffler as they have in the past.
And it's been interesting watching both teams come around to that point that you made, which I think is at the core of all this. You would never go into a major championship taking 4 or 5 weeks off. You can do whatever you want at home, but Scottie talked about it. You're never going to be game sharp. So the idea was either they need to fix the scheduling for these matches, and I think that's probably the broader conversation, that we probably don't need to be waiting 4 and 5 weeks after the Tour Championship or the BMW Championship to plan this, or you're going to end up having to do something like this, where it's a quote-unquote training camp with guys coming in, making sure they're sharp. Just to clean one thing up, Bobby McIntyre actually made it to the 54 holes. He didn't make it to the final round. It was Rasmus Højgaard who didn't make that 36-hole cut.
Thank you for that, for cleaning that up. One of the things that I wanted to touch on, Rex, from Napa, which I found was very interesting, with Jackson Koivun, the amateur, the rising junior at Auburn. Final group finished tied for 4th. You look at his last 4 starts on the PGA Tour: T11, T6, T5, and T4. And before everyone sort of looks at the schedule and starts forecasting out that this guy is going to be the next great thing, he is doing it again, the John Deere, the ISCO Championship, the Wyndham Championship, and now the Procore. But it does make you wonder, in light of recent events, in light of sort of these hot shot players, whether it's Nick Dunlap or Luke Clanton, whether Jackson Koivun, who has already earned his PGA Tour card through the accelerated program with the PGA Tour University, should he turn pro right now? Has anything that you've seen in Napa or otherwise over the past couple months led you to believe that it would actually be a mistake for Jackson Koivun to stay in school and not strike right now and become a full-fledged PGA Tour member?
No, you and I went round and round about this when it came to Nick Dunlap after he won as an amateur last year at the American Express out in the desert, because I think in your mindset was maybe there was a discussion to be had. And I don't think you were adamant on one way or the other, but in your mind, maybe you do go back to college. Maybe there is a benefit for you to spend a couple more years. Because I would say I was not on that side. I thought it was ridiculous to even have the conversation, given the fact that he was in all the signature events. And I don't think we can overstate how important that is for a player right now. It is such an advantage to be able to start your career, not just having a PGA Tour card, but having a PGA Tour card A instead of a PGA Tour card B, which is essentially what you're going to have right now. I would say in retrospect, the struggles that he had after that, where he really kind of fell off and didn't have that game that we saw him have at the American Express. I think it's a valuable conversation to have. And when it comes to Koivun specifically, I think the bigger issue would be, what is he comfortable with? Because he already does have that tour card. It's not as though he's locked up to play in the signature events, and is a little bit different conversation in my mind, only because it's clear that he's already kind of landed on the idea that I kind of want to stay in college right now. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I keep going back to the idea that what the PGA Tour has created with PGA Tour U is something that they probably should have done a long time ago, not to sort of give the negative here, but creating these pathways for these young players is something they should have really considered and worked into a long time before now. Give them credit for finally getting here. All that being said, Gordon Sargent is not the player we thought he was. And so there are going to be those players who are the outliers of Jackson Koivun, where a player suddenly gets a tour card and maybe starts feeling a lot of pressure and maybe starts feeling like he has to deliver. And I think we see it in other sports, and it would be silly to think it doesn't apply to golf.
Yeah, I think you make a good point in that it's a very personal decision for Jackson Koivun. Only Jackson Koivun knows for sure whether he is ready for all that entails of a pro life. Maybe he wants to stay in college for one more year to get all of his ducks in a row, to make sure his agent has everything lined up, to make sure his sponsors there, to make sure maybe there's a part of his game that he wants to clean up that he knows is not quite ready. Look at the results. You look at the statistics. It doesn't seem like there's a part of his game that maybe isn't quite up to PGA Tour standards right now as we sit here on September 15th. But only Jackson Koivun is going to know that for sure. One thing I will point out, and I think Nick Dunlap was different because he was sort of put on the spot, right, where he wins a PGA Tour event as an amateur. He really needs to decide in very short order whether you're going to take up the membership and have full playing privileges, or you're going to go back to school. That was almost an unprecedented situation. We have not seen that since Phil Mickelson in 1991. What I will say, though, Rex, is that these middle of the year turnarounds tend to be pretty hard. And we've seen enough examples now that Ludwig Åberg is the exception. Ludwig Åberg was the Hogan Award winner a couple years ago. Great player in college, was starting to trend nicely as he got through the NCAA postseason, and then hit the ground running as a professional. Had a couple high finishes, just couldn't finish it off on Sunday on the PGA Tour. Goes across the pond with then European Ryder Cup captain Luke Donald, wanting to pick Ludwig Åberg for that team. Ends up having a great final round. I believe he won in Switzerland to make it sort of a no-brainer decision for Luke Donald to put him on that team. That's, however, looks like the anomaly. That looks like the exception. Playing a full year of college golf, basically having a week off, and then hitting the ground running, trying to play as many weeks as you possibly can in a row during the summer to secure your playing privileges, to bolster your status, to try and get in signature events, to try and get the major championships, whatever your sort of benchmark is going to be, it's really hard to do. I think there's no better example of that. You mentioned Gordon Sargent, who had an opportunity to turn professional, decided not to. Now his game was certainly in a different place than it is right now. But Luke Clanton, I think in 2025 also offers a little bit of a glimpse of what can happen. Luke Clanton, I know back in the spring, I was thinking this guy potentially could have an outside chance to do what Ludwig Oberg did and potentially crash the American Ryder
You weren't
Cup
thinking it. You said it,
picture.
to be clear.
No, I said it's certainly a possibility. Is it a remote possibility? Sure. But Ludwig Oberg was a special talent. I think Luke Clanton can be a special talent as well. That's not the point. The point is that Luke Clanton decided to come back to school, had a whole year of college golf, did not play well in the postseason. What he has done on the PGA Tour since turning professional, since now joining the play for pay ranks, 8 starts, just a single finish better than 34th. That is a lot of golf consecutively. All of that, Rex, is to say that Jackson Koivun, if he wanted to jump to the PGA Tour, if he wanted to become a PGA Tour member right now, I think it makes a lot of sense. We're in the fall. There's less pressure. You have time to get everything in order. Then, when the calendar flips to 2026, you're a full-fledged PGA Tour member. You're getting in all of those full field events on the PGA Tour. If he continues to play well throughout the fall series, if he adds a couple more starts here, like all of a sudden he can get inside the
61
next
to
5 and the swing
51 to
10.
60,
yeah, getting into there. All of a sudden he's in the first 2 signature events of 2026, and then you're off and running. So I think it's a little bit of a different conversation than we've had in recent years, but that's really a credit to Jackson Koivun and what he has been able to do this summer, that it's even a conversation. Because you look at the results, look at his personality, you look at his swing, there's nothing glaring about him that does not lead you to believe that he cannot be a productive PGA Tour member right now as a professional. It's all about timing. It's also all about personal choice.
And he clearly has the game. Like, I'm not dismissing that at all. He has shown on not just the college and amateur level, but now he's done it in consecutive weeks on a consistent basis on the PGA Tour level. So if I'm in the room, part of this conversation, I'm not trying to talk him out of it. My only point was, it seems to me a player of that caliber gets to a point where he either commits one way or the other. He seems like he's committed to college, but I see where you're coming from.
Yeah, it's going to be a very, very interesting decision for Jackson Koivun. Looking forward to seeing how that pans out. Rex, we haven't intentionally skipped discussing the BMW PGA Championship. We're not biased here. We're not skewed to the Americans. The reason why we focus so heavily on the Procore Championship, because last week, an opportunity to sit down with Paul McGinley, who captained the European side to victory in 2014, a very wide-ranging conversation about strategy, about the state of the European team, and the biggest outstanding questions for both teams. Let's take a listen. We're pleased to welcome in Golf Channel analyst, Sky Sports analyst, and victorious 2014 European Ryder Cup captain, Paul McGinley. And Paul, it's great to see you. We're coming up on the matches at Bethpage Black. What's top of mind for you at this point in the proceedings?
Well, what's top of my mind? Well, we got a couple of tournaments over here in Europe at the moment that the players and Luke Donald are focused on, trying to find a little bit of form and push things along, make sure that everybody is in good shape going in there. Our team has been formulated now. We've got 11 of the 12 players playing this week in Wentworth in the PGA, BMW PGA. So monitoring that form, we got to get together with the team again this week. And yeah, I mean, I've enjoyed the journey the last 18 months. I've been working closely with Luke, as strategic director, and I think we're in pretty good shape.
You've been through this. What do those team get-togethers look like? Can you take us inside the room a little bit?
This is just very casual. There's no detail at the moment. The 12 players have been formulated now, so this is the first time the group will have got together this week. Well, 11 of the 12. We don't have Sepp Straka here, but it'll be the first time that most of it got together, and it'll be very loose. It'll be easy. It'll be a barbecue, and if somebody wants to have a beer, there's no problem, and a glass of wine, and yeah, just a kind of a get together. There'll be a few loose messages from Luke, nothing too detailed at this stage, and it's a welcoming get together more than anything else.
How important do you think that is, Paul, to have those sort of team bonding exercises? A lot of these players obviously know each other, either playing together on the PGA Tour, the DP World Tour. Some of them live near each other in Florida. But how do you think it's different when you get all 12 in the room together with the captain, Luke Donald, and some of his assistants?
Yeah, it's really important. Of course, it's important. It's not, we started with a group of about 40 that we thought would maybe make the team, and it's been slowly tailored down to where we have the 12 now. So now that they're confirmed, communication goes to another level, detail goes to another level, and Luke and his backroom team are getting really zoned in now on down to the pairings and sharing ideas with some of the players as well, ideas that he's formulated but as of yet has not shared with the players because the team wasn't fully committed yet. So now that it is, he'll share a little bit of those, but it'll be very loose at the moment. This is not any detail. We've got a practice trip next week. We leave on Sunday night for a 2.5 day practice trip in Bethpage. That's never been done before by a European team away from home. And that will be another level of detail there as well.
Why do you think that was important, Paul, to get that on the schedule for 2025?
I think a lot of reasons. I think the last 3 losses that we've had away from home have been not just losses. We've been beaten very, very heavily. We've lost by an average of 3 points in 3 of our last 4 away matches outside of Miracle and Medina. They're very, very heavy defeats. So obviously we're not approaching things right. We have maybe made some mistakes that we want to correct. One of them we feel is not getting the players together enough on American soil pre the tournament once the 12 have been formulated. And our practice trip worked very well going into Rome, where all the players went from Rome to Wentworth and vice versa. And that was a really productive trip in terms of initial bonding, as you say, sharing of ideas in a more detailed way, getting a look at the golf course together collectively, becoming familiar with the surroundings, where the locker room is, where the players lounge is, what the hotel's going to be like, the distance from the hotel to the golf course, and maybe doing some signing and stuff like that, all the back of house stuff that has to be done in Ryder Cup week, and maybe getting a lot of that out of the way in these practice trips. So it's a rehearsal, and it's also getting a lot of things done that will free up Ryder Cup week for us a little bit more than we have done in the past.
I want to drill down a little bit into this year's edition because, of how the last 5 Ryder Cups have gone, the starting point of any conversation has been about the home advantage, right? Course setup, partisan fans. Rory McIlroy has been among those who say that winning an away Ryder Cup is among the greatest achievements in the sport that you could possibly have. Can you explain from your perspective how and why that home advantage makes such a crucial difference?
Well, it's the crowd. Quite simply, it's the crowd. If we were playing on a neutral venue here, with the crowds 50-50, the European team may well be slight favourites, but that's not going to be the case with the noisy crowd that America are going to be able to put behind them. Just like we were slight favourites in Rome with the crowd that we had behind them. So the crowd is the big determining factor. Playing in a hostile atmosphere away from home in a Ryder Cup is not easy, and there's a little bit in the tailoring of the golf course to suit the home team. I think that's part of it. I think there's a little bit in the jet lag, again, something that we're going to get over with by making an early trip over there and get over the jet lag early, a little bit in that. So there's a couple of smaller reasons, but the big reason more than anything else is the away crowd and playing in an atmosphere where 80% of the people on site are pulling against you. That's not easy as a player. I've been there. I've played 1 match away from home and 2 at home in Ryder Cup, and I can assure you it's very, very difficult and a lot different atmosphere playing away from home and a lot more challenging.
What are some of the strategies you could do as a player or as a captain, member of the backroom staff, to combat what is a pretty significant home advantage with the partisan crowd?
Well, there's a number of ideas that we have shared behind the scenes that I'm afraid I can't be privy from sharing them now. But we're aware of how difficult and noisy this crowd is going to be, particularly in New York. It's the heartland of America. We know that. It's a very politically charged atmosphere in America at the moment. We get that. We know that Keegan is a very strong patriot. We know that the president is going to be turning up on a Friday. So we know that it's going to be a very noisy, very pro-American atmosphere that we're coming into, and we got to perform in that environment. And the first step on it is picking players and picking a team that's going to give us the best chance of performing in that atmosphere. And obviously experience was a big part of that. And I think it's fair to say that we're very happy with the team, with 11 of the 12 players having played before. We're only taking 1 rookie with us on the road, which is good. Rookies historically on the road, certainly from a European point of view, don't bring in a huge haul of points. They do play very well when they're playing playing at home, rookies, but on the road, rookies in the past have not particularly been strong away from home. So the fact that we've only got one with us and one that's earned a spot on the team that wasn't a pick in Rasmus, we're very happy about that. So we feel that that is the first step. But before that, even, I think, the fact that we've brought back Luke Donald to be captain here, that was our first roll of the dice. We sat down behind the scenes post Rome, and Rome was a fabulous win for us. I thought our performance as a team collectively there and Luke's leadership was just phenomenal, arguably the best that we've ever seen. And I include my own captaincy in that. I thought Luke did unbelievably well, and probably the best 12 players and dynamic as a team that we've ever put out was in Rome. So as much as American team got criticized for losing in Rome, I honestly think that was the best team that Europe has ever put out, 1 to 12. Yes, we've had superstars in the past, but our team has never been as well balanced or as well put together as it was under Luke in Rome. So coming again with 11 of those 12 players is an advantage to us. But going back to my point, the first roll of the dice after Rome, as we sat down, was to take on the away challenge. Right, what's the first thing we need to do? And my view certainly was a very strong one of, we need to put a captain in play who's been there before. Going away from home with a rookie captain in place is two challenges in one. And we thought that going to an away match with a captain who's been there before, has credibility, has been that soldier, has been the guy who not alone played in Ryder Cups, but has captained successfully as well too, that the players like, was going to be a big advantage to us and give us a good opportunity of closing those 7-point losses that I talked about earlier. So Luke was obviously the person that we asked. He considered it. It wasn't a straightaway decision. He considered it, and we're all obviously delighted that he has taken on this much more challenging role, it has to be said, of trying to win a Ryder Cup away from home.
I want to ask a little bit about the captains from like a 30,000 foot view, because as much as we like to think that these captains lead with their hearts and they're just sort of making these spontaneous decisions, a lot of times it's been planned for months. A lot of times it comes down to their heads. A lot of times it comes down to an entire team of analytics gurus. Paul, how did you use data during your captaincy in 2014?
Well, I think I was the first captain. I'm pretty sure I was the first captain on either side to use a data team and analytics team. We brought in a company called strokeaverage.com. And I remember talking to behind the scenes to the executive of the Ryder Cup in Europe and asking them for a budget to hire these guys that were going to do statistics. And they thought I was off my tree and off my rocker. What was I doing having this guy in? Before that, when I was a vice captain of Monty and Lazaval, I was the stats guy. I was the guy bringing to the table with a sheet of papers with 1 to 12, our best drivers, our longest drivers, our guys who hit the most fairways, the guys who hit the most greens, our best putter, 1 to 12, all basically ranked on DP World Tour as well as PGA Tour data. Very, very simplistic, very basic, and I use that as a basis to form some of the partnerships. So strokeaverage.com took it to a different level. They were also working with some of the players at that time on the European team, so that was a head start that we had with them. And they were a sounding board. They're a reference point. They're not something that we live and die by. We're not going into the weeds in terms of, we've got a 3% or 4% advantage if we go this direction. It's got to be something big in order for the stats guys to convince us. I remember meeting them for the first time, and they sat down to have a meeting with me, and I didn't explain the role well enough to them, because they came with a massive presentation and they talked for half an hour, and I hadn't talked at any stage. Said, okay guys, stop. That's enough. Let's reconvene this meeting. And here's the deal. The meeting is going to be 10 minutes long, and I want 1 page. And that's it. I'm not going into the weeds on this. There's a lot bigger fish to fry than just being data oriented. So once we got past that, we got onto a right path. We've also got Eduardo Molinari now, who's doing our stats. We've moved on from that in Europe, and Eduardo Molinari is doing it. And we've a lot of confidence in him. He gave us great insights going into Rome that we put to good play in terms of how we set up the golf course and the strengths and weaknesses of our players. I think we got our pairings particularly strong when it came to the foursomes in that regard. And I think Eduardo had a big hand in that. So there is places that we'll use it and places that we don't. There are more important things than data in winning Ryder Cups.
It's a very interesting point, because we have seen this statistical revolution over the past decade since your captaincy in 2014. Besides strokes gained numbers or pairing, somewhat logically a great iron player with a great putter, what are some of the other data points, Paul, that you're looking at in regards to pairings, lineup decisions, golf course setup? What's most important when you're looking from a data perspective?
I think without giving too much away, because I've spoken about this before, you reverse engineer it. You start with the golf course. You start with the exam, as I called it. Every golf course poses different questions and different exams and different skill sets of the players. So, I'm a great believer in horses for courses. Certain players are suited to certain styles of golf courses. So you start with the golf course and the exam. If we were playing on, let's just say, argument's sake, we've just seen it in the Walker Cup, Cypress Point. We'd be in a very, very different place in terms of formulating partnerships than we are forming it around Bethpage. So you start with the golf course and reverse engineer it that way, particularly when it comes to the foursomes. And when I was captain in Glen Eagles, we had 3 par 5s that were even numbers. And we also had a drivable par 4 that was also an even number. So you had 4 out of 5 of the longest holes that were even numbers. So it made a lot of sense, and it was very clear there that if in foursomes you want the big hitter driving on those long par 5s and drivable par 4, and that makes things easier. So let's just take one of the pairings where Victor Dubuisson played with Graham McDowell. Graham not one of the longer hitters, but his other skill sets, whereas Victor was long off the tee, and we had Victor drive on the second hole, for example, on the 16th hole and on the 18th hole, as well as a drivable 14th. And Graham was able to pick up the pieces from there and hit those par 5s and 2 after the huge drives that Victor was able to hit, because he was one of the biggest hitters in the team. So that's, without giving too much away, that's the starting point.
When you think back to 2014, you're coming off the emotional comeback at Madonna. You're squaring off against Tom Watson, who I think everyone was curious to see how he was going to fit in that role with the modern player. When you think back to that week, Paul, what was your biggest challenge at Glen Eagles?
I think one of the biggest challenges that I had was Paul McGinley's career was very moderate to Tom Watson. And I think most people's are moderate to Tom Watson's. But I think it's fair to say that I had to get credibility among my players that, this was not about me playing golf against Tom Watson. Our careers being matched, and our captaincy was going to be based on what we did as players. That this was a very, very different dynamic. I know it sounds very basic, but that's the way people were thinking. A lot of people in the media and some ex-players were saying, well, Paul doesn't have the credibility in the game maybe that Tom Watson does. He didn't achieve and win all the majors that Tom Watson did. And, I don't know if he can be a good Ryder Cup captain. And I'm going, really? Is that what you're actually thinking? But people were actually believing that. So I had to deal with that. I had to come up with reasons as to, without going shouting from the rooftops, but to make sure that my players had confidence in me and confidence that I knew what I was doing. As much as I didn't have the career of Tom Watson, I was riding shotgun on a lot of success that we'd had in Europe. I'd played in 3 Ryder Cups at that stage. I'd been a vice captain twice. We'd won 5 out of the 5 that I was involved in. I transcended the eras of Faldo and Woosnam and Langer and Seve and Olazabal and into Westwood and Sergio and up into Rory McIlroy, and I'd either played with or been captained by all of those players, or captained indeed, like I did with Rory before the Ryder Cup. So as much as I mightn't have had the career of Tom Watson, my credibility was there in terms of the experience that I had in a management role. Now, I know a lot of people kind of dismiss the role of captaincy and think that it's blown out of proportion. And I have a very, very different view than that. I've been that soldier. I've been in team rooms, and I see the effect that captains can make on a team. I see the difference it makes in the confidence of a team and the dynamic of a team. And I was very aware of that. So, that was one of my biggest challenges, was to make sure that players didn't follow some of the media lines that were basing me and Tom Watson on what we achieved on the golf course.
How did you do that, Paul? How did you address, maybe a perception issue in going about instilling trust and faith in what you were doing in your process?
Well, putting logic out there, like I've just said to you there, there's the evidence. The evidence is that I'm not hitting golf shots against Tom Watson. I know it's very, very basic, but you'll be surprised how quickly narratives can build, and 1 or 2 players might jump in behind that and give a bit of credibility to that narrative, and all of a sudden people take it and run with it. So, my press conferences were based around, what I do have. And this is, I'm not going to compare my playing record to Tom Watson, but what I can say is that there's a template. There's a template behind the scenes in Europe that I'm very, very aware of. I've been part of, and also I've used myself in 2 Sevi Trophy captains, which mightn't be much to people in America, but they were very big over here in Europe. They gave me a lot of confidence in myself, that I knew what I was doing when it came to captaincy, that I understood how to motivate a team. I understood how to put pairings together in a team. I knew how to counteract what the opponents were going to do. And twice we won that Sevi Trophy. Twice also I've been behind the scenes as a vice captain to, you know, two of the stalwarts in Monty and Jose Maria Lazabal in terms of European success. So I had a huge learning experience behind the scenes, and I really felt that I was primed. I didn't want that to come across in an arrogant way or shout from the rooftops about it, but it still had to be pointed out that, you know, this is. This is not playing golf against Tom Watson. This is a management and captaincy, which is a very, very, very different skill set than what you've achieved. Important, of course, you know, credibility is important in terms of Ryder Cup captain. Let's not get away from that. Somebody who hasn't played Ryder Cup is not eligible really to be a Ryder Cup captain. You can't put them in that position. But you know, I'd done 3 Ryder Cups. I did have a lot of credibility as a player. Maybe not as much as Tom Watson, but I had enough of credibility as a player, and obviously in the management as well too. I'd proved myself.
You mentioned back in 2014, your captaincy was a little bit transformative in terms of how you use data and analytics. Do you sense now, 11 years later, a general shift in philosophy away from, you know, pairings and teams being sort of personality driven or buddy ball, and more into what does the data suggest will be the most effective and produce the best outcome?
Yeah, I think it's certainly moved in that direction, like all sports have done. Has moved in that direction of a little bit more analytical, a little bit more data related. And yeah, I mean, it's still there. There's no doubt it's become an increasingly important part of captains' decisions, but it's not the be on and end all. It's an element. For me, it's not the biggest thing. It's an important thing, but not the biggest thing. There are other things that are more important, but don't ask me what, because I'm not going to tell you.
Fair enough, Paul. If I'll get you out of here on this one. If you put on your analyst hat, what do you think are the biggest outstanding question marks for both of these captains, Keegan Bradley on the U.S. side and Luke Donald on the European side?
Well, oh, that's a good question. Obviously, you know, Luke has got to be a different style of captain away from home than he was at home. The challenges have doubled and tripled away from home than what he countered at home. He did a wonderful job, as I said earlier, captaining at home, but this is going to be a lot more challenge to him. It's going to test him a whole lot more. We got off to a wonderful start in Rome, and we rode the back of that momentum early on in the week. Our players were fantastic. We had the top 3 players in the world at the time, according to the world rankings. In Victor, John Ram, and Rory. So we had a wonderful team primed, and our top players were playing really, really well. So we had a lot of things going for us. Not quite the same here. I think America have certainly, you know, a lot of the top players, Scottie Scheffler in particular, you know, is bringing such incredible form into this Ryder Cup. So the challenge is going to be big in terms of the strength of the American team. And as I said earlier, the biggest challenge of all would be going away from home. So that's going to really test, and I think we're going to have a really good broad view, much broader view, and a more detailed view on how good a leader Luke Donald is, because he'll have the ability to do an away captaincy as well as a home one, and we'll be able to have a wider view post this one. In terms of Keegan, again, you know, he's coming with a very, very strong team. He's got a huge support behind him. He's into the heartland of America in New York. We know the crowd are going to be incredibly supportive, and you know, it's a golf course that he can tailor that's just going to suit his team. So he's a lot of things going for him. He's a nice guy. I like Keegan, I must say, and I think his press conference announcing the picks, he was very impressive in it. And again, I think he'll be a very, very good captain. I know he's incredibly patriotic. He's incredibly proud to be an American, and I think that's going to be a big calling card for him. That he's going to play on that patriotism to get the crowd where he needs them to be. So we're aware of that, and I guess like every rookie captain, you don't really know until the captaincy is over. But you know, certainly the indications that we've seen so far, and the braveness, it has to be said, of how he handled that conundrum about whether he was going to be a playing captain or not, and ultimately sacrificing, you know, himself for the team. You know, how many more realistic chances is he going to have to play, and to be able to put the team ahead of him so far, that was impressive, and how he eloquated it in front of the media too. So I'm looking forward to seeing how both captains go. 2 very different challenges. A home is a lot easier than away from home, that's for sure. And we know the challenge we're up for.
Well, Paul, we appreciate the time. As always, your insights are just so invaluable. Look forward to seeing you on Live from the Ryder Cup beginning on Monday, September 22nd. Thanks for the time.
You're welcome. Good to be on.
And a massive thanks to Paul McGinley for taking the time. Looking forward to seeing him next week at Bethpage Black. Speaking of which, Rexy, as we wrap up this episode, this is the last one we're going to be doing before we're on property for the Ryder Cup. We'll be doing a full Ryder Cup preview on Wednesday of tournament week, then doing a midi pod once the Friday morning foursomes pairings are announced. Initial quick reaction to that one. Where does your mind go now as we're finally, after like 2 years of discussion, where does your mind go as we're now looking ahead to the Ryder Cup next week at Bethpage?
So many amazing places. And I actually did some reporting last week when I was in Napa at the Procore Championship. And I really wanted to talk to the rookies and some of the vice captains, because the idea, us going to Bethpage, and I'm looking forward to getting on property and just seeing what this spectacle is going to be like. And look, I know Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday aren't going to be what we should anticipate on Friday morning when the first tee shots go in the air. But I think we'll start getting a taste of exactly what the New York fans, what Bethpage is going to be like, because I don't think it's overstating it. And we've said this quite a bit now, that this is going to be unlike anything that we've ever experienced in golf before. This is going to be mainstream sports, and there's going to be really, really cool parts of it where the American team's probably going to enjoy a lot of support and almost feel like the home crowd is lifting you on its shoulders. And then there's going to be some really bad, ugly parts of it. And I just think we should all brace for that, because these are New York fans. This is a sporting event. They've been charged a lot of money and paid a lot of money for those tickets. So I anticipate a lot of things being said that pro golfers aren't used to being said. But the story that I'm going to work on between now and getting there on Monday, and I'll land on NBCsports.com/golf later this week, is the idea of what the rookies can anticipate. And so on that front, I went to the assistant captains. I went to Webb Simpson and I went to Brandt Snedeker, who have played in events, big events at Bethpage, and they have an idea of exactly what it's going to be like. So that experience, sort of that madness that we're all anticipating, we're all looking forward to, that's what I'm focused on.
Look forward to that one. NBCsports.com/golf, otherwise known as golfchannel.com. It certainly just feels like we're in store for an all-timer. Doesn't it, Rex? Like something that we haven't seen before, not just because of the New York crowds, but I think the anticipation. You have a player on the U.S. side in Scottie Scheffler, who is, by all accounts, doing Tiger Woods-esque things. He's going to have such a target on his back. And if he falters, if he does not play well, if he in the partnership with either a Russell Henley or Sam Burns or someone else sort of backfires and gives the European side a shot, like if not now, when? This European side is poised to stage an upset. Whether they will, I think, is going to come down largely to how their stars play, a Rory McIlroy, John Rahm, a Tommy Fleetwood, but also how they handle an atmosphere unlike any we've ever seen in the Ryder Cup. Rory McIlroy was telling reporters stories last week at the BMW PGA Championship that Luke Donald has pulled out all the stops, has these guys donning those virtual reality headsets to simulate what it's going to be like playing in that sort of cauldron with 50,000 fans screaming things that Rory McIlroy said were not fit for publication. Those are the sort of inputs that he had with the VR machines. I cannot wait. I think it's going to be a spectacle. I think it's going to be glorious madness. I think we're going to potentially have some fan issues. There could be some issues with President Donald Trump expected to make an appearance on Friday. Hopefully that does not sort of ruin the experience for spectators as well, because that Friday morning at the Ryder Cup, you and I are going to be at the top of the grandstand, as we are each and every time the Ryder Cup goes around, an atmosphere unlike any other. It should be an all-timer. You can tell our excitement. Rex and I are going to be both on Live from the Ryder Cup beginning on Monday. Again, a full preview podcast on Wednesday of tournament week, mini pod on Thursday, mini pods Friday and Saturday, breaking down the double session days before one of the final 52-minute made-for-TV editions of the year, wrapping up the Ryder Cup on Ryder Cup Sunday. In addition, of course, to all of our writing, which you can find on NBCsports.com/golf, aka golfchannel.com. All right, that is going to do it for this edition of the Golf Channel Podcast with Rex and Laugh. Have a great week. Rest up. This is Ryder Cup week, and it's going to be a doozy.